What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you folks right here. We have Tropical Storm Ernesto rapidly organizing, starting to quickly intensify as it approaches the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. We have hurricane hunters out there investigating the system, and they're finding 60-mile-per-hour winds in this. We were at 40 miles per hour last night. This thing has been going off since this morning, and we can go ahead and show you the latest public advisory right here. Minimum central pressure is 1,003 millibars. Maximum sustained winds, once again, are 60 miles per hour. Movement is west-northwest at 18 miles per hour. So this has slowed down considerably since yesterday, where it was going at 28 miles per hour at a peak, and now it's down to about 18, and that allows it to take more advantage of the warm water that's given to near the Great Lesser and Greater Antilles, and allow for this thing to potentially strengthen stronger than I think a lot of people were anticipating. And this is what I was concerned about, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to have to pay attention to it, but we have a hurricane watch. We have hurricane watches now in effect for the U.S. Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, as well as the two islands off of Puerto Rico that are owned by the island, so we're going to have to pay close attention to it. Hurricane conditions are possible within the watch area, and tropical storm warnings remain in effect for a lot of the areas in the Lesser Antilles and Virgin Islands, as well as Puerto Rico. So that's just stuff we're going to have to keep tabs on right here. Data from aircraft hurricane hunters indicate the winds are near 60 miles per hour. We can go ahead and show you that right here. This is what they've been doing in moving into the system. They've been doing that X shape that everyone knows right there. And they've been finding flight level winds nearing 60 knots. The one they had at the peak was about 57 or 58 knots, and the SFMRs were around 49. So that's enough to support 60-mile-per-hour winds blended right there. So definitely something you're going to have to pay attention to in that regard. And this, what the hurricane hunters are finding with this is this system is continuing to strengthen. It's continuing to strengthen at a very fast rate. This Ernesto also right now is not a very large system. It's actually a relatively small storm, and I can go ahead and show you. Tropical storm force winds do extend outward 105 miles from the center, but the core of it isn't particularly that large. And yeah, we are seeing some pretty interesting stuff going on, including a 62-mile-per-hour wind gust in St. Bart's, that's down there in the Leeward Islands. So that's stuff we're going to have to pay attention to. I fully expect this thing to be a hurricane in the next 12 hours, even before this thing leaves the Lesser Antilles. And part of the reason for that is because of the conditions it's being given to offer. Also, there's also a lot of insane outflow. There's another situation where we have really good outflow on the northern side and some more relatively decent outflow on the southern side of the core as well. So we're seeing those channels that we do not want to see with quickly intensifying systems. And I'm also noticing a lot more convection is firing up, especially in the outer bands of the system, which is indicating to me that this thing is organizing. It's growing in size and strength as well. And the NHC is going to have to keep very close tabs on this, as Puerto Rico and potentially the eastern part of the Dominican Republic will need to pay attention to this if this continues to push far enough west. But regardless, that's what we're paying attention to. And I knew the second that it would start slowing down, we were going to see some pretty interesting stuff starting to go off on all cylinders. So we're going to have to pay attention to that right about there. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and kind of talk about what I'm concerned about right here. We can go ahead and show you the cone very quickly. My main concern is for right now is for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, especially considering that this thing is intensifying at a relatively robust pace, and I fully expect this thing to potentially be a hurricane even before it leaves the area and then moves out to sea and potentially impacts Bermuda. The NHC is forecasting this thing to make landfall in Bermuda, which I don't exactly remember the last time a hurricane of this magnitude would do that. I'll have to look at the records, or just let me know in the comments down below. But what I am concerned about this is this system could be rapidly intensifying as this thing moves away from Puerto Rico, potentially into a major hurricane. The NHC forecast wants this down to up to 110 miles per hour. I've been talking to my guys at Storms United. They've been telling me, hey, Patrick, you might I think the NHC might be downcasting this a little bit. They're being a little conservative right here, and we're going to have to pay very close attention to that. So, yeah, things are pretty interesting. The track guidance has been very consistent according to this. as well. And we're also seeing Dvorak consensus with the initial intensity set at 45 miles per knots, which was at 11 a.m. It got up to 60 miles per hour. And here's the 12-hour. It was supposed to be a 65 mile per hour tropical storm around 7 o'clock tonight. I think it's going to be happening, I'd say, a few hours ahead of schedule. And then as this thing makes landfall or makes a very close pass to the Virgin Islands, that's when I believe it will strengthen into a hurricane. Kind of like what Dorian did in 2019, when it was moving through the Lesser Antilles. It was rapidly strengthening as it was doing that. It started off as a 50 mile per hour tropical storm and then rapidly intensified into an 85 mile per hour Category 1 hurricane by the time it left the U.S. Virgin Islands. And this is Ernesto is kind of reminding me of this to some extent, although the difference this time is the Bermuda high is not going to be as strong to push this towards the Bahamas, instead push this towards Bermuda, as a matter of fact. So that's what we're paying attention to in that regard, and that's stuff we're going to keep tabs on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel going forward. However, we can go ahead and start showing you the conditions that we're potentially taking a look at. And let's go ahead and start with those. Let's go ahead and start with the SST anomalies, not the anomalies, SST maps right here. Sea surface temperatures where Tropical Storm Ernesto is right now is in 29 plus degrees Celsius or 84 plus degrees Fahrenheit for those living in Puerto Rico. So that is some very warm water. And if I want to go ahead and take a look at the climate reanalyzer very quickly to see how above average this is. Yeah, where we're at, we're about, I'd say, 1 to 1.5 to 2 degrees above average where this system is, at least in Celsius. So that's definitely some pretty concerning signs to pay attention to. But what I'm also concerned about is these anomalies in the subtropical Atlantic, especially as Ernesto is approaching Bermuda, and it's going to be hitting that warmer water further up in the Atlantic Ocean. Because what we're noticing sea surface temperatures of 28, 29 degrees Celsius. Water's going all the way up to about, I'd say, 35 to 40 degrees north, which that is in the subtropical range, and that is why this system is ultimately going to maintain its intensity as long as the NHC is anticipating for it to, because of those much warmer waters right there. Also, one thing we need to pay attention to and take into account is ocean heat content. So let's go ahead and pull up the OHC for today. OHC is where this system is at, is in an area of about 125 OHC. Ocean heat content is essentially a measurement of how hot the water is and how deep down it goes. As a matter of fact, we can go ahead and show you how deep down that water goes. This is the depth of 26 degrees Celsius or 79 degrees Fahrenheit isotherms. They're down over 100 meters across a lot of the Lesser Antilles and the Caribbean and all that stuff right there. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to that. But this system is moving fast enough to not really tap into that OHC and allow for this thing to intensify. It's mainly going to be the sea surface water temperatures that are going to be driving the system and potentially allowing for this thing to intensify. And we're going to have to pay attention to that in that regard. So we're going to have to keep close tabs on that. One thing we need to also take into account is wind shear. This is the wind shear patterns that we've been noticing for quite a while. The wind shear to its north has weakened quite a bit. It's kind of breaking down as this system is starting to approach and head towards Bermuda and head more towards the north. So that's what we're taking a look at, but there is a little bit of wind shear that's helping enhance the outflow quite a bit. And if we go ahead and show you on satellite imagery where that wind shear is, it's right about here where my cursor is, and it's catching the outflow and allowing for this thing to breathe and strengthen some more. And that's kind of what I was concerned about going into this. I knew it was going to be moving at a relatively fast speed, but the fact that we are seeing such the wind shear at a good angle to allow this thing to potentially get up to hurricane strength before it leaves the Lesser or Greater Antilles is very telling for me. And the reason I say that is because what we were initially concerned about with Ernesto is it was sandwiched between two areas of wind shear, one to the east, or not one to the east, one to the north and one to the south. And we were concerned that it would, that one of those would help either enhance the outflow or get too close to the core and start tearing it apart. It appears that the northern one receded just enough and allowed for the outflow to get caught into that and allow for potential robust strengthening right here, and that's what we are seeing. We can go ahead and go to the archive right here for Tropical Storm Ernesto right here. Let's go ahead and go to 5 a.m. This is at 40 miles per hour. 8 a.m., we can go ahead and show you that 45 miles per hour. And then 11 a.m., we were at 50. So yeah, this thing is intensifying every 3 hours. And the pressure, interestingly, though, has stayed relatively the same. It has dropped about 4 millibars in that 9-hour time frame. But the pressure is going to have to catch up if this thing wants to continue to intensify, because with low pressure systems, the lower the pressure typically is, the faster the winds will be, mainly thanks to the pressure gradient force. PGF is the only thing that allows winds to happen. It's pressure gradient force. That's the one thing that drives the winds. That's what you learn in meteorology. It's literally the first thing you're taught. But that's kind of besides the point. That's a rant for another time. But regardless of that, what I'm a little interested in is the pressure's 1,003 millibars, which for a system of that size is relatively high compared to where it would typically be. Typically be around 1,000, 999, maybe pushing 997 at the lowest. But 1,003 is pretty interesting, and my thinking is either the pressure is going to plummet as this thing continues to intensify, or it's going to just be very slow to catch up, and it won't be able to do that until it gets out into the Atlantic Ocean, which I'm hoping that's the case, because if we see the pressure start plummeting and hurricane hunters can find that while they're out there, then in that case, that is very concerning, especially if it starts right now and it starts to get up to potentially 75, 80, 85 miles per hour as it moves through the Virgin Islands and then starts to make its approach towards Bermuda. So that's stuff we're going to have to pay attention to right there. Let's go ahead and show you the track models and the intensity very quickly, because here's what we're taking a look at with Ernesto. Track models, every single model wants this thing to move east of Puerto Rico, which that is some good news. I'm really thankful that's not going to be making landfall in Puerto Rico. That would have been an absolute disaster considering what happened with Maria back in 2017 and Fiona. Fiona was only a Category 1 hurricane when it made landfall in Puerto Rico, but because it dropped so much rainfall and it caused so much flooding, it was arguably about a similar scale disaster to Maria back in 2017, and that and Ian were the two storms that everyone remembers from the 2022 hurricane season. So that's stuff we're paying attention to with the track models. There is a little bit more of a spread in the models I am noticing in regards to this thing either making landfall or moving just east of Bermuda. That seems to be the general consensus, but a lot of them are concentrated and want this thing to either make landfall or make a very close pass to Bermuda, which even if Bermuda only gets the eye wall and doesn't get a direct landfall, that's still going to be really bad for the people on the island. And I know they prepare for hurricanes because it's a yearly tradition for them, but considering that this is potentially going to be a major hurricane as it approaches Bermuda, that's going to be a little concerning to watch and pay attention to, and that's definitely something we're going to have to keep tabs on. And the question will be, will this be the year that a hurricane finally makes landfall in Bermuda, or will this drift out to sea and stay just east of it or just west of it like all the other systems do? Because we saw Larry in 2021 graze Bermuda. We saw Sam in 2021 graze Bermuda. We saw Fiona actually cause some impacts in Bermuda before dissipating in the Atlantic. We saw, I think it was Franklin last year. No, Franklin was further to the west. But we saw several systems last year head towards Bermuda and graze them, and that's something you're going to have to keep tabs on. Intensity models are also pretty interesting right here. Majority of the models want this between Category 1 or Category 2 intensity at the peak right there, with some at Category 3. But considering the fact that we're looking at very warm waters across much of the Atlantic where it's going to, as well as the ocean heat content being really high compared to where it was in years past, as well as the fact that the wind shear is decreasing and there's not going to be really much dry air intrusion as a result, I personally think this could reach major hurricane strength. I have talked to some of my guys at Storms United. Right now, they're thinking 125 miles per hour as the absolute peak of Ernesto, and that's where I'm holding it at this current point. I'm thinking 115 to 125 at the absolute peak. I'm not saying it's going to be 115 to 125 when it approaches the Virgin Islands or Bermuda or anything like that. I'm talking absolute peak, but that's what we're paying attention to. We're looking at potentially our second major hurricane of the season. We had Beryl earlier. We had Debbie get up to a Category 1 strength. And now we have Ernesto rapidly organizing and rapidly strengthening. And that's just stuff we're going to have to pay attention to down the road and stuff we're going to have to keep very close tabs on. Let's go ahead and show you some hurricane models, because I know they've been working in overdrive to keep us informed, to keep people and saying, hey, we're paying very close attention to this. You might want to take a look at this. So here's where we were. This is the 12Z run right here from the HMON. This was at 7 a.m. This was at 1,005 millibars at initialization. Let's go ahead and see where Ernesto was at that point. 1,005, yeah, that's good initialization on that part of the HMON, and it was maximum sustained winds were at 50 miles per hour. Or no, they were at 45, and the knots right here. Yeah, this actually initialized really well, which I'm really impressed with. But here's what the HMON wants. It wants this pressure to actually get down to 994 millibars as it approaches the Virgin Islands in the next little while. Moves through, strengthens up to a hurricane, intensifies relatively quickly, gets up to major hurricane strength, potentially high-end Category 3 or low-end Category 4 intensity as it approaches Bermuda. The HMON wants this to move west of Bermuda, and the core of it to stay west of it as a major hurricane, and then kind of stay out to sea from there on out. But rapid intensification is not out of the question with this, and that is the HMON right here. Let's go ahead and show you the Halves A with Ernesto. The Halves A, let's go ahead and go to this, had it at 1,001 millibars, so definitely stronger than what the initialization was, but regardless, it wanted Ernesto to make a very close pass to Puerto Rico or make landfall as a 992 millibar system, strengthen up to a hurricane shortly afterward, and then rapidly intensify, get its eye wall and its act together as it approaches Bermuda, moves just west of that. And keep in mind, this is the 12Z runs. The 18Z runs have shifted further to the west, but regardless, the Halves A wants this to get up to Category 4 strength, pressure of 938 millibars as the system grows in size. So that's stuff we're going to have to absolutely keep very close tabs on. Let's show you the Halves B with Ernesto right here. The initialization was 1,003 millibars. Has the system moving into the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico as a 990, a mid to low 990s millibar system. Gets up to hurricane strength. Rapidly intensifies to potentially major hurricane strength. Actually wants this to get up to 145 miles per hour as a 950 millibar system, and then moves through sea, moves just west of the Bermuda right there, gets its core together, still holds Category 4 intensity throughout that entire time. So we're looking at between Category 3 and Category 4 strength in that regard, so we're going to have to pay very close attention to that as well. Let's go ahead and show you the H-Wharf model. This is the 12Z. Where did this initialize? 1,005, so we can, this is a pretty good run. Has this thing strengthening up to 1,000 millibar system. It wanted it at 60 mile per hour winds as it was leaving the Virgin Islands, but it's already at 60 miles per hour. Hurricane hunters are looking at that, and hopefully that data will help feed the 18Z runs, and we can get a better idea of what's going on as this moves through the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, potentially impacts the eastern part of the Dominican Republic, and we watch for more systems this hurricane season. So that's what we're paying attention to. This system starts to really grow in size, rapidly intensify, gets up to potentially major hurricane strength as this thing approaches Bermuda, and then it kind of starts to weaken. It goes through a couple of eyewall replacement cycles, and that's what the H-Wharf is ultimately paying attention to, and that's just some stuff we are going to have to look out for, and we will continue to keep tabs on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. One last thing I will say before I go is, I know I had to cancel the stream last night. I actually have a video up. It's going to be in the end screen if you want to stay to the end of the video to get to that, explaining what's been going on. My friend Ethan, he's going through a lot of stuff mentally, so please say some thoughts and prayers for him, and if you want some more context, go ahead and watch that video, and I explain what's been going on with him, at least in a little more detail. I don't want to get too much into it. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Also, there is going to be a stream tonight starting at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. If I have to cancel abruptly, I will let you guys know. I hope I don't have to do that again, because I did that the last couple of nights. I'm really sorry about that, but if you want to know what was going on, there's that one video that's going to be in the end screen, or it'll be the first link in the description down below. And what's going to be the second link in the description is my Patreon. Be sure to join that. Shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor channel. He's been helping me out for quite a long time, and I've really appreciated his support over the last little bit. So, Daniel, thank you very much for helping me with that. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more people engaged with weather, and it helps me make more videos like these. If you want to ask us more questions or come hang out with us at Storms United, be sure to join our Discord server. Link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.